So for anyone who I haven't met, great to meet you. My name is Ryan Lennox. I'm one of the Copilot leads for our healthcare customers on the California West Coast. And today, extremely excited because Microsoft released our Work Trend Index report recently, which surveys over 31,000 different people across 31,000 different people across 31 countries. And we have one of the research leads with us, Alexia Cambon, to help talk through it. For anyone who doesn't know, Alexia currently resides in the beautifully sunny Seattle, originally from the UK and London to be specific, if I am correct there. Currently
Right.
head of research, Copilot, and the future of work over at Microsoft. And really, as I understand it, what that means is focusing on examining some of the most important priorities, which is AI's impact on productivity and performance. So Alexia, unless you've got anything else for me, I'll hand the mic over to you and let you get started here. And thank you so much for joining us today, everybody.
Thanks so much, Ryan. And yeah, echoing Ryan, thank you everyone for being on the call and for taking the time to hear a bit more about this year's research, which I'm always excited when I get to share with a large group of people. And I'd love for this to be interactive. If you have questions and thoughts, please feel free to pop them in the chat. There's a lot of content here. We're going to try and get through as much as possible in the next half hour. But Ryan, you did such a great job presenting me that I won't spend that much time on intros. It's exactly as Ryan said, I'm head of research for Copilot and the future of work here at Microsoft. And essentially what that means is we try to understand what does the future of work look like, especially now we have AI and specifically Copilot available to us. Every year we start our research by asking a big research question. And the research question for this year's Work Trend Index report was, what is the future of the firm? Very big question, obviously. Companies are made up of structures and systems and people, and all of these are organized based on assumptions about the way we have worked in the past. And AI is forcing some really interesting conversations about those assumptions. So we really wanted to untangle all of that and get into the nitty-gritty. And as we did this research, we came to understand that 2025 is going to be a pretty pivotal year. In fact, 80% plus of leaders who answered our survey said that this is a pivotal year for them to make key strategic decisions. And so we arrived at the conclusion that this is really the year where what we're calling the frontier firm is born. And we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to be a frontier firm and how that is showing up within the data. A bit of context on this research, as Ryan mentioned, it's made up of a number of different work streams. The biggest is our survey. I think this is probably the largest work survey in the world. It goes out to 31,000 people across 31 countries. We also partner very closely with LinkedIn, are privileged to have access to their amazing labor market data. We are able to access telemetry data as well, which for those of you who don't know, it's all of the signals that are emitted from the M365 products. So things like how many meetings are you attending, how many emails are you sending, we're able to capture that in our metadata. So if the survey is really looking at how do people think and feel about work, the telemetry is really, well, what is actually happening at work? And then this year, we also interviewed a bunch of very smart people. We interviewed economists, academics, scientists to really get their perspective on what the future of work and the future of the company looks like. And our first big aha really was that we are all on this very big journey. The journey towards becoming the frontier firm is how we term it. We really see this as unfolding in a number of key phases. And the phase most of us are in right now is essentially where AI is showing up as a personal assistant. And in this phase, everyone is doing the same work they usually do, but better and faster. So AI is helping you do email better and faster, helping you do meetings better and faster, helping you draft first documents better and faster. And this is providing some incremental productivity gains. If you'd have asked me 2 years ago, if I gave you a tool that could give your entire workforce a 5% productivity boost, would you take it? I would have said yes, right? But that's not where AI is going to stay forever. It's also essentially going to turn into a team member. And that is when it's essentially going to join the team and not necessarily just allow you to do the same work better and faster. It's allowing you to do net new work, net new types of tasks. So a really good example is if you have a marketing team and they do all of their typical marketing activities, all of a sudden you give them access to a researcher agent, and that researcher agent can now help them do research that they might not otherwise have been able to do. They are doing a net new type of task. And then we come into the third and final phase, which is really where we see the frontier firm living. And in this phase, if phase one's all about doing the same work better and faster, and phase two is all about doing new types of work, phase three is essentially about taking work off people's plates altogether and automating end-to-end processes and workflows. And this is a very triggering, scary phase for a lot of people because they see this phase and they think, oh, AI is coming for my job. But I fundamentally do not believe we're going to run out of work. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a moment. But essentially, we see this phase as very much every organization having access to a new type of labor, digital labor, a new type of agentic workforce that will work alongside the human workforce to carry out core cognitive activities. So this is the journey that we're all on. It's a non-linear journey. Pockets of our organizations will be in some of these phases and other pockets in other phases. And I think it's going to be a while until all of us find ourselves in phase three. But hopefully that makes sense in terms of how we really see this journey evolving. As we then did the research and started to try to understand, okay, what does the emerging frontier firm look like? We arrived at three key conclusions. The first is very much this pretty radical idea that you can now buy intelligence on tap for the first time ever. Why is that important? Well, intelligence on tap, if you think about it, essentially up until this moment in time, we've only ever really been able to access expertise or intelligence through humans, right? That is what companies are. They are bundles of expertise. For the first time ever now, we will be able to access that expertise and intelligence in addition to humans, outside of humans. And that really changes how we think about how the company is wired. Because all of a sudden, intelligence almost becomes like a commodity. Like you can buy a certain amount of compute, kind of like electricity. And if companies are bundles of expertise, now you can access that expertise in myriad ways. So we have to start thinking a little bit carefully about how we work, how the organization is structured. And that leads into our second key finding here, which is we foresee that the org chart will fundamentally change. We will see that teams will start to be made up of both humans and agents. And org charts are essentially all about how is work organized. And when you now have human agent teams, that might start to put into question whether or not the functional org chart is the right way to organize work. And then finally, our third key finding is very much a call to action to every employee. This is about the ripple effects that all of this will have on individuals and their careers. And we very much foresee that every employee will need to become an agent boss. And we're going to talk a little bit about what an agent boss is. But this is our roadmap for the next 20 minutes. So hopefully this all sounds interesting to folks on the line. So let's start with the first one. You can buy intelligence on tap. If ever any of you on the call get the chance to ask 31,000 people a question, take it. It's one of the most exciting parts of my job is when essentially we design our survey and we try to figure out what do we want to ask people. And one question I really wanted to ask, really wanted to dig into was, why do you turn to AI over a colleague? Now, not why do you turn to AI in general, why do you turn to AI over a colleague specifically? Because there's a little bit of a substitutional element here, right? We are asking people, what are the use cases in which you used to turn to a colleague that you are now turning to AI? And we need to be very careful and thoughtful about those use cases. Now, my hypothesis about the answer to this question was everything to do with why humans are so frustrating to work with. So my guesses would have been things like, oh, I turn to AI because Alexia is really slow, or Alexia doesn't get back to me in a timely manner, or Alexia steals all the credit when I work with her. All of those reasons, the ones that are to do with the frustrations of working with humans, ranked bottom in the list that we gave our respondents, which was a huge surprise to me. This is not why we are turning to AI for help over our human colleagues. The things that ranked top instead had much less to do with human flaws and much more to do with the unique net new characteristics of AI that humans do not and should not have. So you can see what ranked top on the list here. The very first selected answer was 24/7 availability. And this was really interesting to me. Because if you think about what that means, essentially, this is the first time in the history of work that we now have a workforce accessible to us 24 hours a day. The closest we've ever had to this is the follow the sun model, right? Where we send off work overnight to a workforce located in a different geography to get work done while we sleep. I don't think this means that humans will be working 24/7. I think this means that agents and AI have a very unique characteristic where they are able to work 24/7. Because if you think about what a workday is, your 9 to 5 workday, the workday was invented to constrain work within a certain number of hours because humans have a personal life, a family life, a leisure life, a political life, and they need time to be able to cater to those things. But agents don't have any of that. Agents aren't going home to feed their little agentic families, right? Agents don't need a workday because they are not human. And so we will be entering an era in which we log off work and our agents will carry on working for us. And right now, what the everyday individual employee is feeling is the ability to turn to Copilot or to AI at any point in the day with any question, with any thought, with any collaboration need. And that is a very big shift in how we work. The second most selected answer was machine speed and quality. So the fact that humans can only hold a finite number of ideas and figures and facts in our head is what makes our attention so valuable. But AI isn't restricted in that way, right? AI can compute 1,000 data points in 10 seconds. And that, again, is a unique, different quality that AI has that humans don't and shouldn't. The fact that your attention is so finite is what makes it so valuable. It's why social media wants your clicks. And then finally, endless stream of ideas on demand. If I were to ask any of you on this call, give me a great idea in the next 5 seconds, you would probably struggle. Because again, you are human and humans need the creative stimulus to think up ideas. Like I get my best ideas on runs, for example. AI is different in that way. And economists now are trying to understand, well, if we can now capture the value of an idea, we can start to really understand how that contributes to GDP and to economic growth. This is something they've never been able to do before. This is why we are turning to AI today. It's not because it is substitutional of our humans who are annoying us. It is because it has these net new qualities we've never experienced in the workplace. And this is what we need to design for when we think about what we should be using AI within the day-to-day of work. So really, I think this is quite a hopeful story. I think this essentially hints at that AI is a net new form of additional intelligence that's being layered into the workplace. It is not a substitutional intelligence that is here to take our jobs. And this is especially relevant in an era in which we are seeing human labor reaching its limits. Another question we asked in our survey, to what extent do you struggle with having enough time or energy to do your work? 80% of global workers said this was a real struggle for them. At the same time, we have 53% of leaders saying, look, I know my employees are maxed out, but I need more from them. And this is creating this really difficult capacity gap where we need more from our workers, but workers have nothing left to give because the work environment is causing so much demand already. I pulled some stats for you. I know this is super small, sorry, but I had a guess that you might be interested at what this looked like for healthcare specifically. And you can see healthcare listed here. I know it's very, very small, I'm sorry, but you are basically in your industry right along that capacity gap challenge, where we see 78% of workers saying they are struggling with not having enough time and energy, and just over half of leaders similarly saying we need more from our workers. So your industry is following that trend. Why is it that we are experiencing such fatigue? What is it about today's workday that essentially means we can't get the type of work done that we need to get done? Well, one of the best ways we have of looking at the workday is through our telemetry. So as mentioned, all of the productivity signals that are emitted from your clicks. And this year we saw some really alarming statistics. We wanted to look at levels of disruption in the everyday workday. And we saw that on average, an employee is interrupted every 2 minutes during core work hours. So this meeting's been going on for what, 15 minutes? So you can calculate how many interruptions that is just within 15 minutes, right? 60% of meetings are called ad hoc in the moment. The 9 to 5 workday doesn't end at 5. We see that, close to 60 extra chats are sent once the workday ends. And there's a last minute culture happening. This stems from a real life personal experience I had where I run commute to work. I was running to work one morning for a very early call. I think it was like a 7 a.m. call. Got to the office, the call was cancelled. I was very frustrated, very annoyed. I went to my research team and I asked, can we figure out if there is a last minute culture happening? And what we did is we literally went and we looked at the PowerPoint deck in the 10 minutes before a meeting compared to the 3 hours before. And we saw a 122% increase in frantic editing in that 10-minute block. So people don't have enough time, they don't have enough energy. It takes work to do work today. And perhaps it's no surprise that we see that 82% of leaders tell us that they are confident they will use digital labor to expand workforce capacity. So to really close that capacity gap. And if we look at healthcare, you are bang on the money there as well. So you are right in the middle of this chart. That same statistic is the same for healthcare. 78% of leaders agreeing they see digital labor as the way to close that capacity gap. So digital labor could be a real solution for us when it comes to this question of burnout, when it comes to this question of, not having enough capacity. And one of the things we really wanted to check was, well, is AI making any of this worse? Because if we're putting digital labor there as the solution, we really have to make sure that it isn't contributing to this problem of the unsustainable workday. So the way we did this was we looked in the survey itself to try to identify employees in the survey who could realistically be working for frontier firms. We had 5 key characteristics for a frontier firm. You can see them listed in that first paragraph. About 800 employees, 844 employees met all 5 of those characteristics. So of 31,000 people we surveyed, only a little over 800 actually could be considered frontier firm employees. So that tells you something about how few frontier firms there are. But when we looked at the differences between these employees and everyone else, we saw some really hopeful stats, which were all statistically significant, by the way. We saw that 71% of frontier firm employees say their company is thriving compared to just 37% globally. We saw they were more likely to say they could take on more work, more likely to say they did meaningful work, more likely to be optimistic about their future of work opportunities. So essentially, this is telling us, okay, frontier firms that have full-scale AI deployment, that are using agents, they are not experiencing these problems to that extent. Okay, so this is our first key finding. Intelligence on tap. We have a net new type of intelligence that essentially will allow us to close a pretty significant capacity gap that we're all experiencing today. Now let's talk about the org chart. So the way we think about the org chart today, right, is I have all of this functional expertise and I'm going to silo it so I can access it really easily. Because accessing expertise is costly. It is not just financially costly, but it's also transactionally costly. Whenever I hire someone, I have to onboard them, upskill them, assimilate them into a team. So we therefore necessarily organize work around these centers of expertise, around finance, sales, marketing, product, etc. But in a world in which now I could build an agent that would have all of the marketing expertise that I need, and I could do that in less than 5 minutes, should we organize our work around human expertise, or can we start to think about a little bit of a different model? And one of the things we really wanted to explore was, are we going to be moving from org charts to what we call work charts? And work charts are fundamentally about jobs to be done, and that's how we organize work. There are a couple of different models here that we could think about, and we're not prescriptive in the report about what these models look like. We are very much in an exploratory mode here. A classic model that already exists today is the Hollywood model, right? Where movie production, that happens where the movie is the job to be done, and you bring in a cast, you bring in a crew, you bring in a director and a producer. Together they work for 9 months to do the movie, and then they disband, and they never come together again unless they have to make a sequel. That model doesn't really exist in the corporate world because most projects don't take 9 months to complete, right? They take around 6 to 12 weeks. And it is too expensive transactionally to bring together a team for 6 to 12 weeks. But in a world in which we could build an agent and bring that agent's expertise in, all of a sudden, maybe you can start to consider this more dynamic, agile model. And actually, you could equip a product engineer, for example, with a marketing agent that could help bring that marketing expertise to the product. So that suddenly changes how we think about work being designed. So I think this is very exciting. We know there are huge handover costs that come with the model that we have in place today, and we should absolutely expect that we will start to rethink how work is designed. Classic organizational productivity theory is really based on the idea that we have two key inputs to productivity. We have capital and we have labor. And we have a mental model of categorizing AI as capital because that's where software lives and that's where hardware lives. But really, if we think about it, AI doesn't fit any of the traditional criteria of capital. It scales very quickly. It's self-improving. It learns very quickly. And it actually behaves much more like labor than it does like capital. And so you could start to ask yourself, do we actually want to categorize AI as capital, or do we want to categorize it as a new type of labor, as maybe this new type of digital labor? And if we think about it in that sense, it changes fundamentally how we think about the management and measurement systems we have in place. Because right now for capital, you have functions like IT and finance to manage capital. For human labor, you have human resources, but what do we have for digital labor? Digital labor and AI probably lives within IT right now, and maybe that's where it belongs. But we are seeing companies very rapidly start to think about new types of functions that could essentially manage this digital labor. So many of you might have seen that Moderna announced that they were collapsing their HR and IT departments. We have worked very closely with Harvard, who believe that we will start to have what we call intelligence resources departments, which, just like human resources are there to measure and manage human labor, will need something similar to measure and manage digital labor. And it's not just about the management, right? It's not just about putting in place key performance indicators or evaluating and monitoring how agents get work done. It is also about the key measurement systems. What are the key metrics we want to put forth in this new frontier firm? And one of the metrics we are very interested in here at Microsoft is what we're calling the human agent ratio. Now, the human agent ratio is very similar to how we think about the manager and direct report model, which is we know that there is a certain threshold at which a manager can no longer be a good manager if they have too many direct reports. So if you gave a manager 30 direct reports, that would probably be too many. It's the same thing with the human and agent ratio, which is essentially what is the right degree of human oversight needed in this new agentic world. I don't know how many of you on the line have built agents yet, but I know at a certain point, there are too many inputs for me to handle. And as a result, we need to start to figure out how do we evaluate and monitor that threshold across individuals, across teams, and across functions. And it could well be that this threshold varies by all of those different systems, right? Could well be within HR, which involves very sensitive personal conversations. That ratio might be 1-to-1. Whereas in supply chain, where we have a lot of repetitive processes, that ratio could be 1-to-300. But the key point here is that we're going to start to need to construct some kind of dashboard that flashes up, oh, look, this function is running amok. There are now 30,000 agents, or this function isn't using their agent capability optimally. We could build more here. We will need to have new metrics for this new frontier firm era. So these are just some of the ideas of things I think leaders of every industry should really start to think carefully about. All right, we have 6 minutes left for this final section. I know I'm blazing through this. Again, if you have any questions, and I see in the chat one from Mike, the frantic editing in PowerPoint, no, that is a custom telemetry stat that we pulled and did research on within this research team. So it's not one that's available through the admin. I could probably try and see if there's a way we could add it to the admin dashboard if that's of interest. So let me connect with Ryan afterwards and see what we can do. Okay, this third and final section, every employee becomes an agent boss. I remember joining the workforce when I was in my early 20s and essentially wondering when I would get to be a manager. And my manager at the time telling me it'll probably be about 6-7 years at the rate of progression in this company, and being really disappointed about that. That will not be the case for the next generation. The next generation will be entering the workforce and will be expected to manage from day one because they will be the CEO of their own little agentic startup. And that means the type of work they do will fundamentally change. The type of work employees do today is very inefficient. Knowledge work is sloppy, information work is sloppy. And we see that in how information is just absolutely everywhere. We pay a heavy consumption tax. Every single time you get an email or a document, you have to read it, consume it, process it, and we are paying that tax. We are in our email all the time. We are very much in service to our inboxes. And our relationship with technology is very command-based. We give it an order, we expect it to obey us. I think all of this will be taken on by agents moving forward. And instead, I think what humans will do is what's on the right, which is it's not just information that will be democratized anymore. It is expertise. We will have expertise at our fingertips. And what that means essentially is rather than us consuming a lot of the information, we will be delegating work to our agents to consume it on our behalf. And for our agents to report back to us and tell us, this is what you need to know. And that means we'll shift that tax. The consumption tax will be on the agents, and we will be paying a delegation tax instead. I think it's very plausible that our agents will be the ones in our inboxes reading the emails, if inboxes even exist in a couple of years. Maybe we'll just have multi-agent systems with agents talking to each other and reporting back to us what we need to know. And I think we're moving from an era in which we are just having command-based relationships with technology to one where we're actually having conversations with technology. And we're iterating and prompting with these agents to really get us to the outcomes that we need. So all of this to say that for the individual worker, I think we're going to start to see a new type of career ladder. Daniel Susskind is an amazing AI economist. We follow his work closely, and a lot of this is inspired from a paper he released a couple of months ago that was looking at what is the type of work that will remain for humans to do. And I think it's really predicated on three key questions. The first is, what is the work that we need humans to do? And I think that is everything we've been talking about. It is the agent bossing, managing agents, building agents, measuring agents. That is work that every employee will be asked to do moving forward. But then I think there's also the work that we would prefer humans to do. And that is related to the type of work that agents could conceivably do, but we believe it's better for a human to do. So a great example is maybe you don't want to put an agent in front of your most senior customer. Or if you're a healthcare provider, maybe you don't want your patient to get a medical diagnosis from an agentic doctor, right? There are certain parts of relationships in particular that should be reserved on a human-to-human basis. The final step here is really the work we choose humans to do as a society. This is very much what Daniel Susskind calls the moral imperative. What are the types of decisions that are simply too important for agents to take? Where is it that we really want to hold ourselves accountable as a society for this to remain with humans? So I think we're going to have to start to build different skills within our workforces to really be able to take a lot of this on. And we're seeing that employees are lagging behind managers and leaders when it comes to the agent boss mindset and skill set. These are all the different characteristics, the indicators that we thought helped shine a light on who was building that agent boss mindset. And you can see that leaders are rearing ahead here, which is different from last year, where we really saw employees rearing ahead, bringing AI to work, demanding from their leaders that they have access to AI. This year, we see really when it comes to that agent boss mindset, leaders and managers are ahead of the curve. And that makes sense, right? Because they see what's coming. They know how to manage. They know how to delegate work already. But this is very much our call to action to the everyday employee. It's to really get them to start to think about how can we build this agent boss mindset? And I'll close it out on an anecdote where I have a data scientist on my team who did a lot of this research with me. I rely on him very much for all of the data science asks of the work. In the middle of this work, researcher and analyst, the agents that Microsoft recently announced were made available to us. And my data scientist could have gone two directions. He could have said, I'm not needed anymore. I have no value. Alexia's just going to use analyst rather than me. Or the direction he went instead, which is I'm going to build as many agents as possible now to make myself indispensable to my team. And that's what he did. He built 3 different types of agents for this research, including a survey agent and a statistics agent, and he managed those agents. And my access to him was my access to those agents. And he made himself completely indispensable to the team by virtue of adopting that agent boss mindset. So that's how I think we should be thinking about this new era for the everyday employee moving forward. I know that was a very rapid run through and we're at time, but I'm very happy to take any questions or thoughts or reactions if folks want to stay a couple more minutes on the line.
Hey, thank you so much, Alexia. I'm just reading through the chat and there's a couple of questions here. First appears more of a comment from Ferdinand, and then benefits.
Yeah. And Ferdinand, I'll say, like, this is the worst AI will ever be, right? So you're absolutely right. Right now, that agentic ability is still developing, but we should expect that if this is the worst AI will ever be, we will see improvements very, very rapidly. And then from Bob, will benefit scale as human to agent ratio grows, will span of control? I think for sure, like being overwhelmed by agentic inputs is a real thing. And that's what I think part of the human agent ratio is about. It's figuring out what is the right threshold. And this is actually stuff we're researching live now. We're trying to understand, within organizations, what does that threshold look like? We can make the slides available if that would be of help and of interest to folks. Absolutely no worries there. Thank you for all your great questions and for listening to me talk at length for a half hour. If any of you did want to jump on a call with me to chat more about this, very happy to engage on that. And Pat, I saw that last question. Yeah, it's interesting. That time-saving study, we did that in 2023, I want to say, and for sure it'd be interesting to run it again because that was so focused on just everyday productivity. The demand for it has gone down as we kind of move more towards agentic use cases. But if it's something you wanted to run in your own organization as a custom research project, let me know and we can see if we can do that.
Thank you, Alexia, and I'm happy to help distribute the slides following this call to your question, Leslie. So I'll make sure that those come out.
Thanks so much, guys. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for your great questions. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.